My name is Karen. I came all the way from Tel Aviv. If you don't know Israel, it's a nice and peaceful land. It hardly ever appears on the news. And when it does, it's probably like about unicorns and, nothing special. So I've been a back-end developer since I was about 18. And I now design APIs and integrations at Wix. So I'm going to tell you today about how we integrated 250 apps for our 61 million users. But in order to do that, I'm going to have to give you a bit of context as to what we do at Wix. So Wix is an online website builder. We have this WYSIWYG editor. It's very, very pretty, where our users can drag and drop different components onto their site, and within minutes they can create something that they can show their coworkers or their colleagues or their customers, of course. So these components are text elements, they're like buttons, anything you would expect to find on a website. Basically, if you can do PowerPoint, you can do this. You can build a website. So that's pretty cool because it makes the internet and it makes building a website very accessible to people that don't have the necessary tech knowledge to build their own. So our users are mostly small business owners, ranging from photographers to couples planning their wedding to online shop owners. And each of them need different components in order to achieve their goals. So a couple planning their wedding is probably going to need an RSVP form, some sort of seating chart, maybe a registry, and someone who owns an online shop is going to need some sort of e-commerce solution. So naturally, looking at that and looking at the wide range that we have of people using our product, we open up our App Store. So our App Store is basically full of site components which developers worldwide can build using our JavaScript SDK. And these site components, these applications, can be dragged and dropped onto different Wix sites. So these applications are completely self-hosted. We have nothing to do with them. We use iframes in order to show the content that they have. They use our JavaScript SDK in order to get design elements of the site, like text and fonts and themes and colors, and also, of course, open up pop-ups and modals. But that's not really enough, is it? I mean, if you were to go and build a website on your own now, you would probably have like these different components that each of them serves a purpose. And not only does the design have to be sleek and nice and seamless, but there's context to be shared as well. So that's what we wanted to go for. We wanted to integrate not only design, but also events and functionality and data. So when I say events, what exactly do I mean, right? Because it's very, it's very out there. So when I say events, I mean someone filling out a contact form, someone RSVPing for an event or scheduling an appointment or making a purchase. So think about it slowly. Our users build websites, their users come onto their sites and perform all these actions. We want our different site components to react to everything that happens on the site. So if I have an online shop, it probably consists of some sort of e-commerce application, and it probably has a shipping application which takes care of the whole fulfillment process. So if someone comes onto my site and they make a purchase, I want Wix's components to react. Wix has, for example, a newsfeed for the site owner to see everything that's going on their site. That's something that I want to be able to show the moment something happens on the site. But we also have a shipping application, which, as you recall, is externally hosted, which means that it's not connected to Wix in any way. So that means that we want that site component, that means that we want that shipping application to know what's going on in the site as well and start that fulfillment process because, someone bought a shirt and we want them to get it. So there are a few ways we could have gone about this, okay? Of course, we keep our hands completely out of it. We do not care what these applications do. If they want to integrate with one another and they want to be a part of each other's flows or business cases, that's fine. We won't care, right? So it would be completely open-ended, and they can decide on the protocol, and they can decide on the data modeling, and they can pick and choose whoever they want to integrate with, and that would be really, really, really cool, right? I mean, they would have to integrate so many times that they would eventually spend more time on integrations and less time on their core offering, right? So that would essentially mean low ROI for them, right? Low return on investment for them. It would also mean that, freelance developers would not get an equal opportunity in our market, seeing as everyone would flock to the bigger brands. We have apps in our app market from Shopify, from Etsy. Those are big names. No one's gonna try to integrate with, some freelance developer, even though their app might be amazing, right? And that would probably mean that we would have tightly coupled applications for Wix's users. So what do I mean by that? Does anyone here have a MacBook but also an Android phone? Okay, do those two work well together? Do you enjoy your time using those? No? Okay, fine. So I used to work, I had a very long commute, and I try to, all I wanted was to listen to a few songs. I mean, it's not too much to ask, and I moved some files from my Mac to my, I had a Nexus 5, and I thought everything went well, but I started my commute, and then turns out nothing works. I mean, not even my ringtones, because it turns out I did some sort of weird file corruption, and well, eventually I went back to the iPhone because that's the sad reality of things. But I do love iPhones. So that would mean that essentially, when I say tightly coupled applications, what I mean by that is that our users, Wix's users, would not be able to pick and choose which applications work well together. They would only have this specific set of what they can do and which applications work well together. And that would essentially result in bad user experience for our users and bad developer experience for our developers, right? No one wants to integrate with you, everyone wants to integrate with the bigger brand names. So think about what would have happened if Apple or if Google or like Android, would have done that, right? Think about what would have happened if you wouldn't be able to develop applications freely and you would be tied to someone else, having to integrate with them. We wouldn't have a lot of applications that we use today. So naturally, we did not go with that solution, okay? What we went with is something that we call the WixHive. So the WixHive is a hub and spoke integration platform. It's basically a messaging bus or a pub sub hub. And it means that we decide on the data modeling, we decide on the protocols. It means one integration per application, because they would essentially only have to integrate with us. They would only have to integrate with Wix, and we would take care of the rest. So what does that look like? So we talked about, oh, it went dark. Yay, okay. So that, remember we talked about before, we talked about an e-commerce solution that I have on my online shop, right? On my online site with a shop. And someone comes onto the site and they purchase a lovely cat shirt, I guess. And so what happens now is that the e-commerce application, all it has to do is make a post request onto Wix. We in turn send out a webhook to whoever is subscribed, in this case, the shipping application, and they can start the fulfillment process. So, of course, there are a lot of questions that come into mind here, like what do we do about security? How do we make sure that, that these webhooks are really coming in from Wix? How do we make sure that this purchase really happened? Of course, we have a validation process that we put in place, but, that's something I obviously won't go into today. So now we have applications not only sharing the same design as the site, but also sharing context, which is pretty great. But we want more. We want them to share functionality. So this would be a good time to talk a bit about our culture and how we do things at Wix. So obviously, our app market is also full of in-house developed applications. It's not only third-party applications. We have internal clients at Wix that build applications, and they use our SDK. Thus, we eat our own dog food. So that's pretty fun, even though, I would rather they wouldn't have my number and be able to call me and yell at me when things don't work. But, it's part of the reason that we do it. So they came over, one of the applications, and they asked us to integrate with a newsletter application in order to send emails. What they said was, okay, so the website is built out of different services, right? So why not take advantage of these other services? Why not use another application that's on the site for it to provide a different service? So our job, the API designers and the SDK designers, has always and will always be to find that sweet spot, right? We don't want them to integrate directly with one another. As we saw before, that would lead to a lot of pain and suffering. But we also don't want to make something that's too generic that no one will be able to use it, right? I mean, most of the time, when you build a good API, you probably have a specific case in mind that you're sort of generalizing and building on top of. So of course, what we do is we look outside of our domain. We look left and right, and what we saw was smartphones. And if you recall the last time that you used your smartphone, which is just about now, what happens when you browse something, right? You go online and you look at a pretty cat picture and you want to share it with your friends because it's freaking hilarious how that cat fades away and maybe has a brain freeze from eating ice cream and it's super, super, super cute. So you click on that share button and up pops that menu with all these different options to share that information. So you can tweet about it, you can post something on Facebook about it, you can send it via email to your friend or via messaging to your mom. So you can do all these things, and so that's the framework that we used as inspiration. It's not only us that do that, but there's also Netflix's Eureka that does basically the same idea, only with their microservices. So we thought of applications as providers of services. So just as you would have an emailing service provided by a newsletter application, you would also have a SMS service provided by some sort of messaging application. And you would have a shipping calculator service provided by a shipping application. So you can do all of these things, and that's the abstraction that makes our decoupling work. But, because there's always a but, not everyone can wait for infrastructure. Not everyone can wait for us to, to get the resources and move our SDK forward and move our APIs forward. So what we do in that case is we don't block. We're there from day one. We make sure that we understand the use case. We make sure that we understand where the API should be going. We make sure that we support, or we can support, with our API design only, whatever information needs to be passed and whatever integration needs to be done. And that means that our client's code eventually looks and feels as if they are using the API, even though they're actually integrating directly with one another. And so what happens when we're done and when we can't support that framework and when we can't get something up and running is they can make that switch very, very easily. And that means that, while we didn't do, the full dog fooding circle, we did a lot of it. And that means that when they do decide, or when we can supply that framework, they can move easily. We already have something in place that they feel comfortable using, and it's basically just a matter of testing. So this is what we did. We said, okay, there's a e-commerce application, and it wants to send out an email blast. So it goes to Wix and it asks, who are the applications that provide a emailing service that are on my site? We say, hey, there's that one, and there's an ID for that, and you can use it. It goes and makes a post request to Wix, and it says, please send this template to, these people. And we in turn use our webhook system or webhook framework in order to notify the application providing the service that someone wants to use their service. They send out the emails, they notify us back, we in turn notify the application that made the request. So this is all asynchronous, right? I mean, there's no such thing as just once webhooks. There's no such thing as webhooks without a retry mechanism. So we haven't yet arrived at a business case where we needed this type of service to be synchronous. But when we will, of course, we'd have to make some changes. We won't be able to rely on our current infrastructure. But this is a pretty sweet operation because we didn't have to do much, and yet we got a lot. So now our applications can do this. They share a context, and they can listen in on when different site visitors make a purchase. And they have no idea where this purchase came from. It could be any one of the applications that provide this type of service. Any one of the e-commerce solutions that we have in our app market can make this happen. And then they can use another app's functionality to send out an email. That means that we've basically given them the ability to focus on their core proposition and their core offering, and we've given them a lot more offering. We've given them a lot more services based on other applications that we have on the site. So we talked about that. We talked about events. We talked about functionality. And now we're going to play a little game. So I talked about data. I see some, afraid looks, but you should not be afraid. It's all nice. There are puppies. So we talked about data. And this is where we're still trying to find that sweet spot. We're still working on it. So what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to think through my problem, because, I can do that. And I'd like you to put on your API designer hat, and I'm going to tell you what our users said that they need, what our applications said that they need. And, if you have a solution, of course you're more than welcome to come and tell me what you think. And, you will have my undying gratitude, maybe a beer. So this is what our users said that they need. We have a coupon application, and we have an e-commerce solution, an e-commerce application. And the coupon application wants to get the product catalog from the e-commerce application. So think about it. The site owner goes in, he adds a new shirt, and then he wants to give out a coupon. He wants to send a promotion email about this shirt that he just added, about a new product. So the application wants to get the product catalog. It wants to show it to their users. They want to compose some sort of coupon and compose some sort of email and then send it out. Pretty easy, right? It's not a big issue. I mean, if you would have had to do that with, just the two applications integrating, you probably wouldn't have to think that long and hard. The problem is that we want to keep that app decoupling. So here's what we have so far. Here's our baseline, okay? We know that we have to be a proxy, and we know that this needs to be a synchronous API. So that's what, that flow over there, that's what it sort of looks like. And up come all these questions, like, what happens with errors? What happens with timeouts? What happens with retries? We can't use our existing infrastructure because everything is asynchronous. And, if I, as the site owner, had just added a shirt, I want to be able to act on it now. I want to send information now to my customers. So that raises a lot of questions, and that made us sort of stop and think about how we want to do that. So, okay, let's say that we solved all these problems. Okay, let's say that we have a synchronous API and it works amazingly. And so now we have to think about the data, right? I mean, we talked about different applications and we talked about the variety of Wix's users. So it's not only going to be a coupon application that wants a product catalog, it's also going to be maybe a hotels application that wants a restaurant menu. It could be all these different variations of different data, you know, and data is a big word. So we thought about, okay, so we can start modeling things, or we can use something that's already out there. So we thought about leveraging schema.org. Does anyone here know what schema.org is? Okay, so a few hands out there. So it's basically a set of schemas defined by the world's largest search engines, which are Google and Bing and Yahoo and Yandex. And what they basically said was that we want the information to be semantic enough so that we can basically understand it. We want to be able to model everything you see in order to make smarter decisions, in order to show smarter data, or smarter conclusions, I guess. So we thought about doing this because websites are going towards that direction, in that direction. And if we do use schema.org, that would mean that there's already existing work, there's existing documentation. If there's an e-commerce platform, they're probably already doing this. So there are existing libraries, there are existing tools, and that would mean that we, as Wix, wouldn't have to redefine everything. We wouldn't have to reinvent the wheel. And that's something that's super, super, super important when you define APIs or when you define SDKs. In general, when you define tools or when you invent anything new, is try to use something that's already out there in order to explain what you want to achieve. Try not to reinvent the wheel. That's like a software basics. So we said, okay, let's do schema.org, but it's not a perfect fit. Because we thought about our most basic of use cases, just that product catalog, just that situation where, you know, someone just needs a product catalog. But the problem is that the schemas defined by schema.org, they're too verbose. So that means that in order for someone to get the information that they need, just for a product catalog, just for creating a coupon for just the one product, they would have to make 2 calls. And had that been a specific integration, had that been a direct integration between 2 applications, between 2 servers, that wouldn't have mattered. The problem is that because we need to be a proxy, that matters a lot. Because that means that we have a whole lot of other problems that we have to deal with. So I'm just going to throw this out there. This is a lot of text. You do not have to read this, but if you want, I could send this to you later. It is a lot of problems that we still have to deal with. Starting from, okay, how do we embed things? How do we search by ID? How do we do all these different, how do we deal with all these issues? And our biggest problem with all of this is not the implementation. Our biggest problem with this is actually the guidelines. Our biggest problem is the documentation. It's the reference. It's explaining to our users, to our developers, how do you even use this? How do you start? So for services, for what we saw earlier, for using another app's service, I have a very long manifest of about 20 pages in like this Google Doc and it's all about the implementation. But you know how long my directions on how to use this are? They're about 5 lines. About 5 lines on how to use that API. And that means that we did it right. That also means I can come here and explain it to you, and within less than 5 minutes, you would get the idea. But for that API, for the data API, I can't do that. And so that's when I realized that we have to stop, we have to reconsider, we have to rethink what we're doing in order to make this API something that's usable, something that's developer friendly. And I think that's what I'm going to leave you with, because coming from back-end development and using a lot of different APIs and being a part of a lot of integrations, that's something I've been scorned, okay? I am done using bad APIs, and I don't want to be a part of creating them. So I'm gonna leave you with that. If your documentation or if your reference is too long, if people do not know how to use your API, it does not matter how big, how scalable, how, it doesn't matter what you do. People need to use your API for a specific reason, and that's what should guide you at the end of the day. So as I said before about the data APIs, that's something that's still that we're still working on, and I would very much love to grab any of you for a beer or for a chat about this if any of you have stumbled upon this type of case before. So come and talk to me, and of course you're welcome to leave feedback, and thanks for listening.